the work is done. We'll walk by faith and not by sight. By faith our prophets all the day.
The reading is taken from Ezekiel 37, verses 1 to 14. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" I said, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." Then he said to me, "Prophesy to these bones and say to them, 'Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord.' So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, 'Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breathe from the four winds, and breathe into these slain that they may live.' So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, 'Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord, when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I am the Lord, that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Glory to you, O Lord. Now a man named Lazarus was ill. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay ill, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is ill. When he heard this, Jesus said, this illness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please do take your seats. That reading, famous reading, we probably know it quite well, speaks of Jesus' conquest of death itself. And it's one of those readings which feels, as I'm reading it, like it's just too good to be true. Like, if we really got what Jesus is saying there in that conversation with Martha, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." If we answer the question he then asked, "Do you believe this?" the same as Martha's, and meant it, then almost there'd be no more point us gathering. We'd go out from here with a joy unspeakable. Our whole approach to everything we experience in the world would be completely different. To know that Jesus Christ has us safe in his hands, so that even death itself cannot harm us anymore. If we belong to him, that's the promise. It's the most extraordinary claim that Jesus is making. The writer Ernest Becker used to talk about death being like a rumble of panic underneath everything in our lives. He compared it to the rumble of subway trains in New York City. They didn't build them as deep as they did in London, and so you can hear them when you're walking along the streets every now and then in London. I remember once Jenny and I, a friend brought us a spa day in central London at the Hotel Café Royal has a spa sort of built underground. And we went there, and we were lying back. It was a beautiful, relaxing experience. But every now and then you could hear the trains rumbling by because you were further down. Ernest Becker said that's what death is like in our life. It's under the surface. We don't talk about it, don't think about it, but like a rumble that's there. Particularly with COVID, of course, that rumble felt like it was very loud, at least for a while. But Jesus is saying, if you hear that rumble, if it disturbs you, if it keeps you up at night, if it's just there somewhere in your life, well, Ernest Beck says it is there, driving us underneath it all. Jesus says, I can deal with that. It need not be a rumble of panic in your life ever again. It's the most extraordinary passage, one of the most mind-blowing moments that Jesus claims to have mastery. He claims to have complete sovereignty over death itself. But in fact, there are two details in the way that the story unfolds that are, if you like, extraordinarily mind-blowing, that raise the bar to an unbelievable level. Hopefully not quite unbelievable, but certainly beyond our ability naturally to grasp. The first extraordinary thing that we see in this reading, besides the fact that Jesus conquers death, is that he is sovereign over every single moment of the story. It's not just that when death comes, suddenly he sort of springs into gear and fights it back. That would be a way that you think about it. It's all kind of going wrong in the story, that at the last minute he shouts, "Come out, Lazarus," and Lazarus comes out, and everything goes back to how it was before. In fact, the burden of the first half of the story, as confusing as it is, as these kind of slightly enigmatic sayings and words of Jesus, is that from beginning to end, Jesus is sovereign and completely in control. And that is difficult because basically that means he lets Lazarus die. He deliberately waits for Lazarus to be in the tomb for such a long time that there's no way he could possibly just have, fallen asleep and was going to get better. If it wasn't for Jesus, he'd be absolutely stinking by the time he comes out. He would be long, long, long gone. one of the strange things at the start of the reading. We almost see from the disciples' point of view the bind that Jesus is in. His friend, his dearly loved friend, is ill. You think, go and rescue him right now. We've seen Jesus a number of times save the day when people are suffering in some way. He brings healing. Why don't you just go there right now and heal Lazarus? He's your dearly loved friend. But at the same time, one of the challenges that the disciples think that Jesus has is if he goes back to where Lazarus is, that's the part of the country where they are most anti-Jesus. So if he goes back there, they'll kill him. So for the disciples, it's like, well, what does Jesus do? Go and heal his friend? Or stay out of the way and let him die and save his own skin? But Jesus doesn't have any time for that. He's like, that does not bother me in the slightest. I know exactly what I'm going to do here. And it leads you, I think, to one of the most difficult parts in the whole of the gospel. Just 2 small verses, but in verse 5, we read, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So, verse 6, when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was 2 more days. The so at the start of verse 6, it doesn't really say so in the Greek. It just puts these 2 things together. Jesus loved Lazarus dearly, one of his dearly most beloved friends, and he doesn't go and save him. He stays where he is for 2 days. There's no way of making that sort of fit neatly together. It's not as if Jesus has some kind of, well, let me tell you what I'm going to do here. He just sits back and lets it happen. And he doesn't want us at that point to think in any way that he doesn't love Lazarus. He loves Lazarus from the bottom of his heart, cares deeply for him, and for reasons that he doesn't give any explanation for, he lets Lazarus die and then goes to bring him back from the dead. He doesn't justify it to us. At that point, you're just desperate for Jesus to say, let me tell you what's really going on here. He just says, look, I love Lazarus. I'm going to let him die, but I'm completely in control of it all the way. The situation at this point looks like it's spiraling out of all control. From our point of view, we know how the story goes, so we kind of comfort ourselves that it'll sort it out. But from their point of view, they've never seen Jesus do anything like this. So what they see is someone just letting things seemingly get out of hand for his own reasons. Now, it seems to me that if we take this seriously, then in our own lives, when we look at all the circumstances that sort of transpire, all the things that happen, the big mistake to make is to read off those circumstances whether or not God loves us. That's the temptation. We all feel it. We do it all the time. If I have my health, if I get my kids into the right school, if I seal the deal on that house that I've been longing for, if I get the promotion, have a good career, I look at all that and say, look, now I know that somewhere, I wouldn't say this quite so out loud, because it sounds quite crass when you put it this way, but that's how I know that Jesus loves me. That's how I know that at the center of the universe is a God who cares for me. Because look, he's done all that for me. But here, at the start of this reading, nothing goes right for Lazarus, and John the writer does not flinch in saying, Jesus loved him to the very depth of his being. It's extraordinary. Almost no one else in the gospel gets this level of love from Jesus so explicitly stated. Jesus loved Lazarus to the bottom of his heart, and nothing went right in Lazarus' life at this point in the story. So the challenge for us, if this is true, if Jesus really is sovereign over all the details, then we don't read his love for us off of what's going on in our lives right now. We read it off something else. We have to read it off, if you like, his own words to us and what he says to us. Søren Kierkegaard, who was a Danish philosopher of the last but one century, used a nautical image to explain this. He said this: when the sailor is out on the ocean, when everything is changing all around him, when the waves are born and die, he does not stare down into the waves because they are changing. He looks up at the stars. Why? Because they are faithful. They have the same location now that they had for our ancestors and will have for generations to come. Get the picture. A sailor doesn't try and navigate according to the waves because the waves don't tell him anything. They're going up and down all over the place. He navigates by looking to the stars, by finding the fixed point that he can direct his boat by. And the challenge of the first half of John 11, if you like, is for us to do the same. We all want to read off our circumstances. Look, I know that things are going well and that there's a God who cares for me because look what he's doing in my life. Conversely, when things are going badly, does he love me? Does he care for me? John 11 says, if Jesus loves you, he loves you. And if he can let even his most beloved friend die, and that not affect his love, then how much more in our own lives? When here we are still here. We might have had a terrible week. We might be going through the very worst sort of experiences and pain and sadness and loss. Do not let that think that God stopped caring for you. His love, if you like, goes beyond our circumstances. That's what it means to worship a Jesus like this. Now that's mind-blowing, isn't it? That's not how I think. But it is the invitation of John 11 to trust God like that. Here's the second mind-blowing detail, though. Not only is Jesus sovereign over every moment of the story, he is also intimately involved in every moment. I stopped reading at verse 27 with that declaration of Martha. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. But it's really interesting as you read on to see the different way that Jesus interacts with Martha as opposed to Mary. So Martha and Mary both come to Jesus and say exactly the same thing to him. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. With Martha, Jesus gives her basically a theological treatise. He gives her a theological explanation. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. It's dense and rich and takes ages to even say, let alone unpack. What does he do with Mary? Well, same question, same accusation really. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, verse 32. Verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. He gives theology to Martha. He gives tears to Mary. That's all he does. Where have they laid him? And the emotion overwhelms him, and he pours out his heart of grief. That is extraordinary. And actually, if you like, it kind of gives us another angle. Having just said that Jesus is sovereign and in control and completely over all the details that are happening right in this story, it'd be easy at that point to look at Jesus as some kind of cold puppet master. I love you, but I'm going to let all this happen. And if you're going through something painful and that's all you hear in one sense, you might think, well, God is just this sort of distant controller of events. But right alongside that promise, rock-sure guarantee that nothing happens apart from Jesus' control, here in the moment, with these two sisters, his heart responds in such different ways. And in fact, when it comes to death itself, not just the sisters, but death itself, well, verse 38, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? As he approaches death itself in that tomb, both of these extraordinary reactions, if you like, are there. On the one hand, he says, I'm going to do it. Trust me. But at the same time, it says, once more deeply moved. That's about the biggest understatement in the Bible. Deeply moved. The picture, if you imagine an angry horse snorting, that's the depth of emotion that Jesus had. As he approaches this tomb, he is overwhelmed with anger and grief. In that moment, right in the details of this story, we meet someone in Jesus Christ who is passionately, intimately engaged. He doesn't treat this like some kind of, easy miracle that you can just throw out, bringing people back from the dead. He is not cold or dispassionate in the way he approaches death and this tomb and the pain that these sisters in particular are experiencing. And time and again in John's Gospel, those two ideas come alongside each other, right next to each other. Jesus is sovereign and in control, and nothing will happen apart from his purposes. And Jesus is passionate and full of care and love and anger, and will do the right thing. Now, we find it hard to put those two things together, don't we? If I think of someone who you might say is like, sort of dependable, someone you can rely on. We use pictures, don't we, of like they're a rock, they're solid. Sort of, they might be a bit boring, but they're never going to overreact. They're never going to kind of, fly off the handle. There's someone just steady that you can rely on. But Jesus is a rock and someone we can lean on for a completely different reason. Not because he is, if you like, void of emotion and sort of cold and unfeeling. He is a rock because he could not be more full of true and right emotion. So that in any circumstance, he responds to the maximum with love and compassion. I don't know if this illustration helps you, but perhaps it will. I raided some of Benji's blocks. And if I took the blocks and started to fill up this little pot here, I could put a few in, and they kind of rattle around a bit. If I tried to put a few more in, they're still rattling. If I could fill this little box up with blocks to the fullest, so there wasn't any space, then in one sense it would be completely full, bursting, and if I shook it, it wouldn't move at all. There's two ways, in other words, that a box like this, if you like, can be immovable. It can be empty, or it could be full to the brim. When we meet Jesus Christ, we don't meet someone who is, if you like, empty of emotion and just coldly sovereign. We meet someone who is full to the brim, who could not be more emotionally engaged, more in tune with his emotional life, who could not respond in any circumstance with more love and more compassion. And so he responds in every situation in just the right way. And that's why he is so dependable for each one of us. That's why his love for us is so rich and deep, and the only thing that we can really build our lives on. Because whether you come to him like Martha, needing a theological treatise, or like Mary, needing his arms wrapped around you in love and care, he will give you just what you need. When we read in this story that he has power over death, in other words, that is not just, he can throw out a cure. He can. But when he comes to defeat death, he comes in the fullest measure, with the fullest, deepest love for you. And of course, we know that he has that depth of love for us, because from this point on in the gospel, there's only one direction in which his love is going to take him. If you like, the fullest expression, the depth of his being of love for us is going to be expressed in his dying for us. It's interesting in the way that the gospel is told. It is precisely this moment when Jesus raises Lazarus that finally, if you like, the death sentence is passed over him by the authorities. They have to get rid of him at this point on. Someone with this power and compassion and care and love and subversion of the way that things are, we have to get rid of him. But Jesus Christ knows. The only way that he's going to bring Lazarus out of that tomb is by going into one himself. The only way that he is going to deliver us from that rumbling panic of death is by submitting to it himself. And he doesn't do that coldly. He doesn't do that, superiorly. He comes with all of his love and all of his compassion. This morning again, will you receive that love? Receive that depth of care that Jesus has for you that no one else in the world could possibly have. And delight in it and respond to it, as we say, as we finish communion every week, by giving your life to him completely. Let's take a few moments to consider our own response to this Jesus. And then Saskia's going to come and lead us in some prayers of intercession.